Escape room employees, what's the least successful escape attempt that you've ever seen? We had a group from work go for team building. They got into the elevator and it stopped working. They spent 15 minutes trying to figure out if the elevator was meant to be part of the escape room. Didn't want to press the emergency button because wasn't sure if it was some reverse psychology thing. Ended up getting really hot, and one of the dudes started panicking. Took off his shirt while in the elevator. Basically spent the whole time debating. Ended up getting a call from the escape room people about if they were going to miss the appointment. Waited another hour for the fire department. Got out and had to come back to work. Team building things have been on hold since. No one talks about Naked Brian. Comment. Also, if it's a good setup, the employee would absolutely be supposed to mention odd items like that and identify the actual emergency button, which should have a safety system around it to prevent game presses. Something like, participants, please be aware that there are buttons or switches intended to be pressed as part of the escape room that may be used for actual emergencies in other places. The real emergency buttons are located under a cover clearly labeled as a real emergency button. If they're really set up properly, they'd identify the appearance of the real emergency buttons prior to entry. Story 2. Had one group get stuck on the thought a lock was the next solution. Even after basically telling them the solution and that it wasn't that lock, they ran back to it. It wasn't even a lock they were supposed to open. It was one for us, and they wasted 75% of their time on it. Story 3. You get these kinds of people from time to time, but there are people that no matter how much help you give them, they just cannot understand what to do. You get people sometimes where you can straight up tell them, put the code 1234 into the lock that you're holding to unlock it, and they just will not get it. We have a room where there are backpacks that you find with items inside. In an escape room, if you ever find a bag, usually, the first instinct is to open it. So I had one team where I told them to check out the backpack in the room, and they just picked the backpack up and then said, now what? And I had to tell them that they're supposed to open it and see what's inside. Also, FYI, when we say that we'll be watching your game, we're telling the truth. If you ever go to an escape room, understand that someone is always watching and they can see absolutely everything that you do and hear everything that you say. I've seen and heard many things that I wish I could forget. Don't be all over your partner to the point where you're borderline in the rooms, and please don't play an escape room at the same time that you have a phone appointment with your doctor. I learned more intimate information about a woman who is a complete stranger than I ever wanted to know. Story 4. I'm 100% positive that I'm the subject of one of these stories. My group once put me in charge of a puzzle involving wires during crunch time. Since I'm a tech geek, I stood there with a handful of wires being completely useless, and it took a couple of precious minutes to get the team to stop panicking with their own projects before they realized what was wrong. I'm colorblind. Story 5. Did a Silent Hill escape room once. You had to get past Pyramid Head to escape. Me and my friend were convinced it was animatronic and was going to jump at us when we went by. So we wasted time throwing slippers from the previous puzzle at near it to try to trigger it. It was not an animatronic. We got out to the guy running the room doubled over, laughing. We had run out of time, but he'd let us finish because he saw and heard us panicking over pH and wanted to see what we'd do. He said no one else had ever done that before. Story 6. My wife and I got stuck on a door. We unlocked the door. We pushed it, we pulled it for like 5 minutes. We had to ask for help. It slides open. We still solved the escape room otherwise. Story 7. Not an employee, but a player. The game had runes on the ceilings, saw our walls that were supposed to correspond to certain numbers based on how far apart they were to one another. We just thought that they corresponded to the order they were in. Typed that incorrect code into the door lock, and it opened because it lined up with an old code from a previous game that had never been wiped from the keypad. It worked, but did we successfully complete the game? I think we broke it. Story 8. Not an employee, but a fun story from one of the only rooms we lost. There was this table with a design matching these metal tiles of various gods. The tiles stuck with slight magnetism. We had too many people in the room, so we were letting each person tackle a task on their own while the rest explored. My poor friend spent 45 minutes on this tile puzzle before we realized the table and tiles were just set dressing. Story 9. I am the least successful attempt. Played a Saw room with a buddy. We go through the rules talk. The game master explicitly says, there's nothing above the 2-meter mark. You do not need to climb something. We get separately marched into the dark room. As I enter, I see legs sitting on the ground while I'm bound by the game master to a pipe. Puppet video plays. Time starts. First question of me. Buddy, is that you on the ground in the dark? I get a yup as answer. First mission, get the lights on. The first 2 light switches were easy finds. We just also found a scissor we needed for another riddle. Scissor in hand, we spotted what looked like a light switch next to a camera, musing to ourselves that we might have to hit the switch clearly 2 meters above ground. Despite the fact we heard from the guy beforehand, there's nothing above 2 meters. We took 10 minutes of the room and 5 throws to figure out we need to press 3 light switches, the third being in the dark corner on my side, hidden behind the toilet prop I had so eagerly shoved my hands in moments ago. The rest of the room we were taking apart everything we got our hands on, interrupted by a constant static sound that really helped the immersion as we felt in the moment. In the process of the static, we took apart a cabinet, hung off 2 mirrors, took apart multiple baby puppets, including clothes and limbs, found a nail that I almost rammed into a puppet's head since we found a picture of an X-ray with a nail in a skull, constantly horrified by static sounds every time we got closer to the solution. Trial and error, am right? We get through the second and third room, find multiple wires that need to be held and connected to close the electric cycle that's going to open the exit. With 3 minutes on the clock, instead of solving the last riddle for the last wire, we turned on electricity and I simply grabbed both of the ends where we were missing like a meter of wire. I get an electric shock as legitimate pain runs through me. The exit door opens. Problem solved, right? We thought so too, until a horrified game master stands there, completely pale, and goes, "OMG, are you all right? The wire puzzle isn't built to be solved like that. Do you need medical attention? And why TF? Didn't you react to my clear warnings?" Turns out the speakers connected to the GM didn't work. The static we were hearing that added so much to the atmosphere, just a defect speaker. Found out that day in terms of puzzle solving, I'm an absolute barbarian and got a discount on another room, since I literally electrocuted myself. Story 10. My wife managed rooms. The best story is where a laser pointed to a wall, and instead of redirecting it, they kicked the brick wall in. My friends had one in a tower with a water tap in a cage. They managed to open it with a wrench through the bars. It was not part of the game. They could not get it closed, and the water ran into the control room below. They gave them a record time for that. Story 11. I somehow got into being an escape room tester, and I've seen some bizarre behavior. Usually a new place will get some friends, family to come in, and then a couple more experienced folks, and the totally new folks can get weird. Was doing an Edgar Allan Poe themed room, and this lady just sat down and started reading the prop books, telling us, "The answer's in here." 40 minutes of reading for this lady. Story 12. Had a radio in our game that linked to a specific station using an FM transmitter. When the player tuned to the correct frequency, it played a nice, clear, loud message from the game character giving a clue. Players thought they had the right frequency, but this was in fact a real radio. Therefore, they accidentally tuned to an actual radio station. The announcer gave the phone number for the radio station, and one of the players called it thinking they would get a clue. I reminded them that phones weren't needed and gave them some extra time for the clever effort. Story 13. Not an employee, but the group I was with spent 30 minutes trying to figure out how to use a combination lock, 3 right turns, 2 left, 1 right. We had the right numbers, and I assumed my group knew how to use that type of lock. Story 14. I played a cowboy-themed escape room with a friend once. We made it into a second room, which had a few air rifles mounted to the wall, which I assumed was just part of the theme, and were decorative only. Well, my friend had other ideas, unbeknownst to me as I was facing the other direction, trying to solve another puzzle. She managed to pull one of the rifles off the wall and fire it. It wasn't loaded, but made a very loud bang. Yeah, we got in a lot of trouble. Still managed to escape, though. Story 15. As a guest. 8 people. They lock 4 in one tiny room and 4 in another to start. Each room has 3 light switches, a word puzzle, a combination lock under the word puzzle that held the key to let us out of the room, and a couple of blocks, one which worked with the word puzzle. There's also a window through which you can see the wall window of the other room. My room figured out the word block puzzle easily, then got stuck on the combination. Turned out, one of your light switches turned on the combination code for the other room, where they could see it, but you couldn't. Reflected below the window of the room. If you flicked the switch in your room, the code would light up on the outside of your room below the window. I remember fiddling with the switches, but when they didn't do anything, we stopped. So, no way to communicate. It was very dark, with only a couple of black lights, and you had to be looking at the right place when the other room messed with a light switch that seemingly did nothing. It was my first escape room, and I was not impressed. In the same game, once we all got out, a member was doing a puzzle. I'd already noticed the little poster that was obviously the clue to that one, zodiac signs corresponding to letters, and left her to it since there were lots of puzzles. Turned out that she hadn't noticed it and was just putting it together willy-nilly. She spent at least 20 minutes on it and did not end up with the correct solution. We did not escape, LOL. In a different 2-person game, I did with my partner. We had to locate symbols on blocks under a black light and put the corresponding ones in their place, etc. Problem was, the black light was tiny and in a crevice, and we legitimately could not read the symbols. Plus, I think one had actually worn away. So, even though we understood how to do the puzzle, we couldn't solve it and needed help. I do generally enjoy escape rooms, and I want to do more. Story 16. Can I share even though I'm not an employee? I'm going to share. My wife's mother wanted to do an escape room for her birthday. This was a mistake. By her own admission, she is not bright. She wanted her husband, Stepphil, and her stepson to come too. They are very, very not bright. And they are ignorant to this fact and take joy in being as obnoxious as possible. My wife picked out what she thought was an easy one. It had an Old West theme, so that sounded fun. We get there and the receptionist is non-binary. So naturally, Stepphil has to make a scene about it. We apologize profusely to them and just get everybody into the room as quickly as possible. There were a lot of math-related questions, which wasn't terribly difficult, so we let the mill handle it. My wife and I move on to some logic-based riddles, but the boys, they found the musical riddle. It was a piano that required you to play a specific tune, a clue we had not yet found. And instead of waiting to come across the clue, they just started randomly hitting keys. Literally, non-stop key bashing for the next 40 minutes. We kept begging them to stop, but a little light would flicker if they accidentally hit one of the correct keys, and he was so close to figuring it out. By the time we found the sheet of music that was the correct sequence of notes to play, I gave it to him, and surprise, he can't read music. So I played it real quick, got the key. We needed to unlock the door only to find that there was another room. We had 5 minutes left because none of us could focus with the buffoonery that was two grown men acting like toddlers who had discovered a piano for the first time. My wife and Mill just resigned themselves to not finishing it, and we sat and waited out the timer. Never again. Story 17. I'll flip it a bit. A while ago, there was a National Escape Room Championship. We decided to try to participate. Sounded fun. Basically, you got a slot of 2.5 hours. Where you had 10 min each for 20 mini rooms. You were timed. It was a disaster. The slot before us ran over by more than 90 minutes. When we finally started the cast, majority of rooms were way too complicated. Out of the first 10, we maybe solved 3, and one do them was because the lock fell on the floor and opened itself. You could see the times of teams before, around you. There were at least 6-7 rooms that no one had been able to solve all day. We ended up walking out as it was getting late, and we were seriously over it. There has not been a repeat championship. Story 18. Not an employee, but I went on a date years ago with a girl and her work friends. They were all very nice, but let's say not the most likely to be solving puzzles. We go in, they close the door, play the little introduction that tells you where to get started, and say, go. Apparently, I was the only one who paid any attention because immediately everyone races around the room picking things up, trying to turn knobs, moving things to look behind them, opening drawers, legitimately trashing the place, looking for clues. The employee watching us on camera is flabbergasted. We couldn't solve several puzzles because things were no longer the way they were set up. We didn't even come close to escaping, and I obviously said no the next time I was invited to go out with them. It was for axe throwing, and there was just no way. Story 19. I was a player for this one. My hubby and I were doing a carnival-themed game. The first screw-up was getting to ride a Dodgem car a few meters forward, which had the key to the next room. My husband was in the passenger side and failed to mention that he hadn't bothered to actually put both legs in the car because he's so tall. Cue me accidentally driving too close to the wall, getting his foot stuck between the Dodgem car and the wall, then having to wait a solid minute for a cool-down period before the operator could restart the car. Then we were rolling again. Cleared the Hall of Mirrors room fairly quickly, and ended up in a room with colored flags on the wall. A screen with corresponding colored animations showing like a green carousel going right, a kid going down a red slide, etc. Figured out very quickly to match the colored flags to the directional animations to unlock a sliding lock. Failed. Tried it a few times. Had been told the directional lock can be finicky. Decided that wasn't the code. Tried for the next 15 minutes every other code combination under the sun, with the operator trying to give us clues. Before we all realized we had actually gotten it right from the start, we had to tell him the exact code we had put in. And the lock was just faulty, and he had Ro remotely open the door for us. We did not successfully complete the last room with the last 5 minutes we had, but the operator walked us through the last puzzle and let us press the escaped buzzer at the end. For all our failings, XD. Story 20. Customer was part of the office's social committee, consisting of 3 members. We set up a night at the city's most popular pub, followed by a round at the nearby escape room. We advertised for 2 months. The only people to show up were the social committee. When they asked for a team name, I said, the Antisocial Social Committee, before I even knew people were printing Antisocial Social Club on clothing. Story 21. Customer, contestant, work social event. The room had a sign saying, keep off the grass. The floor was AstroTurf. A group of 6 of us managed to balance on a plinth, which had enough space for 2 to 3 normal-sized people in a big group hug. After balancing up there for 20 seconds, We hear over the intercom, that's adorable. But no, not part of your room. Please don't fall off. Injury reports are a massive faff. We only missed out on the room record by only 2 minutes, 16 seconds, and best of 3 other teams by a good 10-25 minutes, so we were still pretty pleased. Story 22. We had one guy who wanted to do a room by himself. No big deal. It was slow, so we said why not. He was bad, very bad. Our rooms are an hour long. Since it was slow, we let him go overtime. He ended up taking 2 hours. Not to win, to get halfway through. We then had to kick him out for the next group. He had so much fun, he immediately wanted to do another. We sent him to another location a couple of blocks away. This was with help. Gentle nudges at first, into shoving, into step-by-step guides. That was not a fun game to GM. Side note. If you ever had a close escape, you probably went over time a little bit. The system we used, we could pause and add time however we wanted. We would never subtract time. Your fast runs are 100% yours, and you deserve to celebrate if it only took you 30 minutes. But we wanted people to be happy and escape, so we would help the clock when needed. Story 23. Not an employee, but the first and only time I've been to an escape room, one of the guys in my group, a friend's husband, thought he was going to be a badass and just break his way out of the room. So he whipped out a pocket knife and tried to jimmy the door latch open so he could break out. There was so much secondhand embarrassment that I suffered from that. Just super cringe. Like, dude, just play the FKN game. Story 24. My husband and I do these regularly. We usually do pretty good and have been told that we communicate really well with each other when trying to figure out puzzles. We're used to most of the universal rules and have never had to use an item twice, as far as I know. We were doing one with another couple, and because we don't work as cohesively with other people, the items in the room were being moved around, and it was hard to tell what was still in play. We opened the first hidden compartment and got the clue. And because we had so much stuff all over the place, I moved a few items out of our way that we had already used and put it inside that compartment, and we moved on to the next one, only to discover that we had to use the same key twice. We went to go get the key from my out-of-the-way pile, but the compartment had gotten locked again by accident with the key inside. They had to pause the game and go get the manager to figure out how to open the first compartment without a key to get the key out. We still got out on time, but it was a huge mishap on my part. I just wanted to be organized. It was still a lot of fun and such an amazing double date, but we do prefer doing them with just the two of us. Story 25. Not an employee, but did an escape room with my family once. There was one wall with a magnet on a chain on it. My dad spent 20 minutes playing with the magnet, while my mom, sister, and I actually solved the clues. Eventually, we opened a door to a room on the other side of the wall. There was a maze of the other side of the wall and a key on the ground. Turns out, we were supposed to have someone on one side of the wall, using the magnet to move the key, while someone else told them how to get through the maze. The employee later told us he never saw anyone get the key out of the maze by just randomly playing with the magnet. Story 26. Not an employee, but I have a story. I went with some coworkers, all females besides me, 8 of us total, and there was also a little boy and his sister in there with us. There was a zombie on a chain, a guy in costume, and if he touched you, then you died and had to sit out until the puzzles were solved. We get most of the clues solved and figure out that the door behind the zombie is where we need to go to get the key to get out. We devise a plan to have everyone distract the zombie while I run and get the other door open. Right as we get in position, the group takes on step. The zombie growls. Then all of them ran away, besides the little boy, and he just stood there, frozen in fear. The zombie got me as I was getting into the room, but I still got the door closed. As I sat in the room, a hole opened up in the wall, and there was a guy sitting at a desk with a bunch of screens, and he was like, "Yay, so we both know you're dead. I saw your team damn you over though, so just take this key and y'all can go when you're ready." It was hilarious how it played out, but I definitely trusted all of them less after that. Story 27. A friend works at an escape room. A group of moms come in once every few months but do not even attempt to solve anything. They all just lay down or relax in the silence. I think they come to escape life for a bit. The workers all know them and they are lovely women who just need to escape. Story 28. Had a work group play as a team building. The second puzzle was to find a key to unlock a desk. The middle compartment lifts up after you unlock it. The person who unlocked it tried to pull it open, wouldn't budge. So instead of then trying to lift proceeds to tell the whole group, "Guys, we need another key to unlock this drawer." Now I thought surely someone would double check this person's work, but no. Everyone believed them and no one else gave the desk a try. I chime in asking if they'd like a nudge, since they did unlock it, and I don't want them to be stuck, but they shoot me down and say no. 30 minutes go by, and they finally cave and ask for a clue. I tell them that desk is in fact unlocked. They just need to lift it open. They were very pissed off at the one person and did not make it out. Story 29. Player start of the game had an alarm going off in a museum with flashing warning lights. And yes, we had told the game company there was a player with epilepsy and please to turn off such things. Had to use the emergency key and wait 10 minutes for the alarm sequence to finish. Story 30. I worked a few years at an escape room. Least successful group has to be a group of elderly women from a nursing home. I suppose the people there thought it would be a fun experience. Out of the 3 rooms, they never even made it out of the first, and they were more concerned about if there were enough chairs to sit on than solving the puzzles. They also got really annoyed when I tried to help them. Did have some fun experiences too, though. One group unlocked a lockway to early into the escape room, and I couldn't figure out how they did it. Scared, I made a mistake by leaving the lock open. I asked them afterwards. We have digital clocks in the rooms to show them the time left. They said they used that clock to open the lock. Out of the 3,600 seconds, they looked at the only single second where the combination would be correct. I was baffled. Also, I heard one person saying, if there is a question mark, that usually means it is a question. Very funny to hear, but he's not wrong. Story 31, not an employee, but something I heard about from a former coworker. She invited me out for her 21st. Among the festivities was an escape room. I couldn't make it due to previous commitments, but I heard from her after the fact that she was so drunk that she was trying to tear things off the walls and dismantle lamps and things. About a year later for my birthday, I decided to do an escape room. I went with family only, and we asked about the wildest stuff they'd seen with someone trying to get out. The game master went on to describe what I'm pretty sure was my coworker. It was kind of odd hearing an identical description, but from someone totally different. Needless to say, coworker did not escape, but we did. Story 32, opposite of the prompt, but here's the most successful escape I have ever seen. So, like a usual escape room, we give our guests an hour to complete an escape. We had this one couple come in and they could not solve a single thing. They had been in there for like 45 minutes and couldn't figure anything out. The girl was doing most of the work while her boyfriend just stood there on his phone. After a while, she got frustrated and said, if we don't get out of here in time, then you're not getting any tonight. That man put his phone away and went into Sherlock Holmes mode. They were out of that room in the next 10 minutes, with only a few minutes left on the clock. All I can say is that motivation is the key to success. Story 33. My one and only escape room, we did really well, until a lock was literally broken opening only halfway. But because we solved the combo by getting 2-3 of the numbers and just testing. Until we got the rest, the escape room. People refused to come cut the very obviously stuck lock until we got all of the combination. But they also didn't tell us, hey, I know you know it's broke. You just have to get the last number before we can help. They just let us rant about the broken lock and try to unstick the broken lock for like 10 minutes. Then they fixed it and we finished the game in like 5 more minutes. They complimented us on our fast time despite only be 3 people and how we were almost a record time. Yeah, we would have been a record if your lock wasn't broken. Story 34. A group of brunchers came to attempt our hardest room. They had brunched thoroughly and were already very wild and immobile. The room they were attempting was big, 6 separate rooms with a simulated earthquake that a normal, sober group of 6 would struggle to do. Turns out one of them snuck beers in their cargo pants and spilled it everywhere. 10 minutes in, the game was stopped and they were asked to leave. Moral of the story, brunch and escape rooms do not mix. Side anecdote, have had many peers as well. I could go on for a while with the wild things I've seen. Haha, edit, spelling. Story 35. Not an employee, but just before the panty started, we did a speakeasy themed one. Well, we took some psilocybin beforehand. We went and got distracted with all the artwork for a few, then sat down and chatted 45 minutes till they just let us out. Story 36. Not my story, but one I heard from the teller after we finished. The first puzzle is you being locked into a prison and having to find your way out. Next to the door is a panel you can remove with a string noose and a mirror. The group spent nearly 40 minutes trying to figure out what to do with it before they realized they could the noose to hook the door latch by using the mirror to see outside the room. Story 37. Not an employee, but just my own experience. I went for my birthday some years back with a few girlfriends. We did a wine tasting prior, so we weren't necessarily drunk, but we definitely weren't sober. We were all put in handcuffs to start, and I think they knew we were a bit tipsy, so they hinted a bit at where the key was. We tried for about 5 minutes before one of my friends goes, "Oh, look what I have," and pulled out a small bottle of wine. So we sat on the floor in a circle, all handcuffed, passing around a bottle of wine. Somehow we found the key to get the cuffs off, but I genuinely don't remember how. We had a blast, and the girls who were at the front desk said it was hilarious to watch on camera. Story 38. First time doing an escape room. The adults in their 40s went in one, the teenage kids went in the other room. My kid told me after they had finished they were waiting for us, she heard the employees talking, saying the people in the room were cheating. That was us. The adults. My husband saw a color-coded clue without the special glasses which were locked under a clue, so missed some steps. Then we were stuck on another clue, so one of the guys got bored and picked a lock to the room next door. We didn't read a clue right, so missed the answer. The clue to get out of the room didn't work with the right answer, so a bit of a Schmidt show by the end, but we had fun doing it. Story 39. Not as funny as the others on here, but the least successful, not really even an attempt, was a group of completely drunk bachelors party. Already drinking in the parking lot at 10 in the morning. Drunk was so close to just not letting them participate that did not manage to solve more than 2 riddles. Gave all of the tips I could up to the point of telling them the solution, and they just did not believe me. One of the guys sat down on a chair and straight up fell asleep after 5 minutes. Rest stumbled around and I was never as scared before. And after that, they will break something. Worst group ever. Story 40. Not an employee, but I was with a group for a bachelor party that was supposed to do a Wild West heist-themed escape room. The whole point was to separate into 2 groups and use a walkie-talkie system to give each other clues. The husband's sister decides, girls versus boys, and takes the women into the other room to start trying to beat us. It takes me a whole hour to convince this dumbass we're supposed to work together. We finally get out of jail, the first room only, for the whole party to try to leave. I have to then get the hostess to help me explain that there's a second room, the vault. This wedding party was so stupid I was embarrassed to be with them. Story 41. Had a group of 10-year-olds come in for a birthday party. The adult accompanying them into the room took the walkie-talkie and refused to accept any hints. We even tried to talk through the walkie-talkie with freebies, maybe check under so-and-so object, and they just wouldn't do it. Needless to say, they didn't get anything accomplished in an hour. And it was the easiest reset LOL. Story 42. We did one in NYC that was totally busted. They prepped the room with the wrong answer key, which made it impossible. They had one puzzle that didn't work, and the employee at the end just told us, oh yeah, you guys solved this one quickly, but the button doesn't work. Another puzzle we had access to was missing 1 of 4 blocks. And due to having a mechanic where we'd be locked out for 10 minutes in 3 wrong answers, then 5 minutes every time. After that, we couldn't even just try to input random things for the missing digit. We did eventually, but were locked out the whole time. So we got stuck impossibly 20-30 mins in, then just sat around. It sucked. Story 43. I was on the bad escaper side once. We were explicitly told we did not need to break anything or pull anything off the walls to solve the puzzle. So, we found a key inside ballistic gel and just kind of ignored it. Spent the entire time looking for a key after that, while the room employee kept telling us we already had the key. Eventually, the game ended, and the employee told us we just needed to break open the gel to pull the key out. Story 44. This one family went, and when they got frustrated, they couldn't get out, realized since they had used a Groupon for it, they were going to get their money's worth. So they just posted up in there and started ordering Instacart groceries, spending days in there. Eventually, Dr. Insano's assistant, who ran the escape room prison, said they had been in there so long that the escape room was going out of business. So a data company was taking over and renting the space. Then, the data servers that were moved in there got so hot the family started overheating. But it turns out the assistant was Dr. Insano the whole time and wanted them to get stuck in there. Damn nuts. Can't believe it even happened. Story 45. Not the employee, just me. In one of the first escape rooms I did, I saw a brick wedged into the wall with pieces of grout. Started pulling them out to get the brick out of the wall. Double-checked over intercom that we were supposed to be pulling a brick out of the wall. Got confirmation. Spent another 10 minutes dislodging the brick. Turns out it was just a brick. And later in the escape room, you solved a puzzle that pointed a laser at a specific brick that was made to be removed from the wall. Story 46. Had the opposite once. We did an escape room with around 7-8 people for a friend's birthday. There was a main room and 2 smaller rooms. We found the final key while the majority of the people were in other rooms and had a decent amount of time left. So we started sneaking people from the party out the exit door when others were not paying attention in the side rooms. Birthday boy's wife didn't notice until she was one of only 3 people left. Story 47. I'm really sorry to the employees who had to deal with us versus the puzzle that required us to match tones being played from a source. We are all very tone deaf. Hearing us argue over what sounds we were hearing was like something out of an IASIP episode. Again, sincerest apologies. Story 48. Not an employee, but I've done several. I insist that the smartest strategy is to institute a 2 or 3 minute rule. If you haven't cracked a clue in that time, it's time to ask for a hint. If you keep refusing and get deadlocked, you're never going to get out. Have a secretary who is in charge of writing every hint down and set up active and solved piles for each clue found. Last escape room I did, we got out with 26 minutes to spare. Story 49. Back when I worked at one, I had a couple give up on the room for the last 5 or 10 minutes and make out with each other instead. I ended up turning the monitor off because I was so done. Story 50. I was delivering to an escape room once, and the vehicle I drove was super loud. I had a heavy package for the escape room, so the back door flew up loudly and down. It was one of the older mail trucks, LLV. By the time I get inside with the package, the employee is snickering. One of the ladies apparently could hear the truck and thought it was part of the experience. She became so paranoid that she was basically useless for any of the puzzles. Story 51. Reading the comments makes me think of creating my own escape room. In order to win, all the player has to do is open the door and leave. The trick to winning is to not let your mind get carried away. Similar to what I've read so far, I just want to witness humans becoming dumber and dumber because they think they're smart. They think they can waltz into an escape room and solve the puzzles instantly. My escape room would require the player to accept their own intellectual shortcomings. Story 52. At a work event, it was 3 rooms out of the 70s. There were these beakers full of liquid and some essential oils. At one pet, we needed to spell out something merging, using the first letter of what each liquid smelled like. This girl sat there, smelling it for 10 minutes, before dumping them all into a cup on the desk. We couldn't get through since she ruined it. Story 53. I heard from someone at work they got the first clue, which was a code, but they were trying it in the wrong lock, put it in wrong, and accidentally opened the escape door. The staff said it was the fastest anyone had solved it. They played it off like it was intentional, but really they'd wasted their money. Story 54. Not an employee. I did one with a friend and her then 6-year-old, where you had to connect a bunch of cables up a certain way to unlock something. I didn't realize that I had done it successfully, causing another clue to appear that my friend had started working on, and 5 minutes later was still working to solve the puzzle. We were given the hint that I was done with that puzzle and could stop. Story 55. Half of these scenarios can be explained by the fact that most escape rooms are kind of schmitty and poorly thought out. People thinking that locks in the room are part of the escape scenario are right to do so. It should be clear what is in the game and what is out. They wouldn't be being perceptive and resourceful if they ignored all the actual escape possibilities and paid attention to cryptic fake paper mache props. Story 56. Waiting to read our story. Piazza. Don't do a wine tasting and then do an escape room. One person just laid on the floor and slept the whole time. The other tried and eventually joined her. My friend and I got some of the clues, but after a while just gave up because the wine started hitting real hard. I didn't know until reading that the employees listened to us. Well, I hope we gave them some good laughs. Story 57. A group of retired ladies. After the instructions, half of them refused to even enter the escape room and just left. The remaining 5 started playing. But since it was our most difficult room with loud music and low visibility, it wasn't ideal, and 2 more left shortly after. The last 3, including the one who booked the escape room, had a lot of fun though. Story 58. A huge group came into our escape room. Halfway through the game, the cameras went out. Managed to facilitate the game with audio only, but the group still did absolutely horribly. They barely made it through half the room. Went back in once they were done. They'd gotten behind the wall and unplugged the cameras so they could piss in the room. Didn't even bother with most of the puzzles. Story 59. Not an employee, but one time I did an escape room with my family, and we got all the way to the end and then horribly stuck. We just couldn't figure it out. We ran out of hints and eventually out of time. Well, we could leave the whole time. We unlocked the last lock and then walked right by the door, not even thinking to push it open. Very annoying. Story 60. My friend worked at an escape room and her story made me laugh. A group of guys were doing a room. Not great, but they weren't terrible. But they also weren't going to escape on time, and they realized it. They all panicked. One of them stripped off his shirt and they peed on it and then tried to use that on the door handle to open it. It didn't work. Story 61. Just a customer with a bad experience from years ago. An acquaintance in my group thought he was being funny and adventurous by trying to force wooden panels open by trying to break them. This is on brand for him, so I have no idea how he's never gotten in trouble or how he's living a successful life after all these years. Story 62. I wasn't part of the team, but I heard about it. I work in a pharmacy. A team from work went as team building exercise. They ended up in a zombie outbreak room with a lot medical history built into the puzzles. One of the members was a big horror fan. They basically walked in and walked out. Story 63. Knew a guy who wasn't let out, even though he solved all the clues. After a while, he had to go to the bathroom, number 2, but it turned out to be a fake toilet with a chokehold. The workers gave him a bucket and said, "Here's a puzzle for you. Try getting that real crap out of that fake toilet without getting it all over yourself." Story 64. My wife shat herself inside of the escape room, and she ran out into the car, fully embarrassed. And I had to finish the escape room by myself. I didn't finish. I assumed the employees thought we broke up because she dashed out so quickly. And when I lost, they still asked me to take a photo by myself. Story 65. We once had a hen do that, came in very drunk and eager to play the room, only to start sobering up 15 minutes in when the puzzles proved too difficult for 6 drunk hens and a giant inflatable cock. By the 20-minute mark, 2 of them were asleep. They didn't escape. Story 66. I went to one once and we had the code for like 15 minutes and the lock just wouldn't work. Guy running it finally came in, couldn't get it either, ended up giving us a screwdriver to take off the side of the lock instead. Was pretty dumb. Story 67. A couple, M18, F17, visited us for their first date. Anytime he was focused on a puzzle, she was checking him out instead of helping. The next time, slot wasn't booked, so I let them run over their time and finish the room. Story 68. Not an employee, but we had an employee tell us that there weren't any clues or anything hidden in the ceiling, which implies they had quite a few people trying to get into the ceiling. Story 69. Not an employee and not my room, but I read a story about a group that got stumped and just sat down and pulled out a crack pipe and started smoking it. Story 70. This couple barely got into the last room with lots of help after their hour was up. We were super slow. They asked for more time, so we let them play for another hour. They still didn't get out. Story 71. I was once in an escape room as a participant. We were supposed to use a knock code on a door to open it. We just pushed real hard and it opened. Didn't know till later. Story 72. One time, I set up a game where two guys had to saw off a leg that was chained in order to get the escape key. And wouldn't you know it, they both sawed off the wrong leg. Both of them died due to blood loss. RIP. Story 73. Escape room employees. What's the least successful escape attempt that you've ever seen? First response. Oh, I have a story, but I am not an employee. The story of Reddit in 2 lines.